Welcome, and thanks for stopping by. Whether you're watching us on YouTube or listening to our podcast on one of your favorite platforms, I'm glad you're here. At this time, I would like to thank our partners and sponsors for their dedication to helping the show to grow. We cannot do what we do without their help.
Hey, everybody, you have reached the Millennium Beat with your host, Kevin James. Today, I have on the computer with me Pastor Tiffany Bell.
Oh, thank you for having me, Kevin. I'm so excited to be with you and your amazing audience today.
Where did you come from? Where were you born? I mean, it's a hear the pre-pastor Tiffany story. Because I'm sure you weren't born a
Absolutely.
pastor.
Well, actually, I feel like I was, but yes. But
Well,
you
yeah,
know
okay.
what? I was born, I believe that call comes. Charleston, South Carolina. So if you know anything about South Carolina, I was near the coast and all the beautiful
Oh,
historic sites and architecture and just
mm,
beautiful. I didn't grow up that close to all the nice areas, Kevin. I actually grew up in a very small kind of poverty-ridden place, but
okay.
God had surrounded that place with so much beauty and hospitality. It was a great place to grow up.
Now, I've been in Charleston many years ago. Actually, I slept through a
Ah,
hurricane in Charleston. It was probably, I'd say,
okay.
1988, maybe around there, because I went
Hurricane
to.
Hugo,
Was it? Yeah. And
86.
another hurricane, well, the house that we were staying on, it was on the beach, on stilts and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
I remember I was so tired because I was on the road. I went from Massachusetts to Charlotte to Texas. I flew to Charleston for the wedding. My buddy got married. So I'm there.
Wow.
We're at clubs and stuff like that. And I'm standing up, music going, people are, and I'm going like I'm falling asleep amongst a crowd of people standing up. I was so exhausted. So I literally slept through a hurricane. And a couple hurricanes later, that same house that I was in was completely destroyed. It was washed away into the
Oh,
sea. So,
wow.
but I did.
Wow.
I haven't been to Charleston for a long. All I remember was a big Catholic church, in downtown, and that's all I remember. I don't really remember going around looking, touristy things and stuff like that. Maybe one day I'll get back there again. But so
Oh,
Charleston
you
is pretty
do a
cool.
beautiful.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I'm eventually. I always talk about that. I'm going to move to North Carolina. Probably buy some land up there, either North
That's also
Carolina
beautiful.
or the other side of the mountain, Tennessee. So, all right. So that's where
Well, you
you were
can't go
born
wrong
and
with any of
raised.
those.
Yes, they're all good spots. So you were born in Charleston. You said, right? Is that right? You were born there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So is that how long did you live there?
I lived in Charleston for 43 years, planted
Wow.
a church there, raised my daughter there, had roots. And then about 2 years ago, I met an amazing man of God, and the Lord began to
Okay.
blend our hearts. We got married, and I'm now in sunny Arizona.
Arizona. I've been there too. I've been to let's see, I flew into Phoenix, Arizona. And I remember getting to the
Yeah.
place in the airport and it's just the way it looked. It looked old, but it wasn't. That was the way, that was the style, and the only thing I didn't like about Arizona was when I walked around is I didn't like rock yards. I'm not a fan of rock yards. I mean, I understand why, but I don't like them. That's me personally. I don't like rock yards.
Yeah. I will tell
But
you, though, Arizona has some amazing people. Yeah,
yeah,
amazing people here. It's been.
yeah, they're probably, yeah, they are definitely amazing people because I went to, I think it was Scottsdale. He was a children's pastor in a church in Scottsdale, and then we went to Flagstaff, and then went to the Grand
Wow.
Canyon, and we went to is it
Hmm.
Phoenix, Arizona? It was like First Assembly, some big church, and then it had
Yeah.
what they call Prayer Mountain. We climbed Prayer Mountain. This was back in my really skinny days when I got down to
Wow.
200 pounds, at the skinniest I ever was.
I hear
I got pictures of me at the Grand Canyon and stuff like so. Arizona's nice. I'm going to get back out there again. Once I get the bus, I have people and different people like yourself. And one of these people, when I do interviews, I'll keep them in mind and I say, oh, hey, I'm going to be in your area. Or let's do an in-person interview. Come drive out, park my bus, you walk in and we do a live in-person interview. So that'd be cool. So let's back
there
up a
you
little
go.
bit. Let's go back a little bit to
Sure.
your early days. Because you said something
Okay.
about starting a church and all that kind of stuff. When was
Yeah, sure.
I'm curious, when was your first inkling? Well, actually, let's go back let's go back a little bit before. Let's talk about your upbringing a little bit. You said where you were born, but let's talk a little bit about your upbringing and what was going on when
Hmm.
you were a kid, because that is in your bio and your story. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, I mentioned, I alluded to, I grew up in kind of a poverty-ridden area,
Right.
and my dad, before I was born, he'd become a pastor. He was really trying to change and just revitalize that area,
Hmm.
and he faced a trauma, a tragedy. His mom had gotten sick and passed away, and it impacted his faith. It impacted
Right.
his faith in such a way he stepped away from it. And when
Uh,
he did, there's nothing much more miserable than a Christian and a pastor that have walked away from what God's called. So he became a
right.
very bad alcoholic, and that road took him further than I think he would have ever even imagined. He ended up being one of the biggest drug dealers in our state. So it,
That's
it was
crazy.
a crazy turn of events. I personally, because I was so young, I don't remember him as a pastor.
Hmm.
But as I've become a pastor myself, I've heard so many testimonies of the amazing things he did in ministry during the
Okay.
times that he served. And at the end of his life, my
Hmm.
father ended up in prison. He got sentenced for selling drugs. He ended up with 150 years. And
Wow.
Kevin, that's a death sentence. That's life
Yeah.
changing. And so at
I don't think
13
anybody
years
lives more
old,
than 150 years. Nobody lives more than
no,
150 years.
yeah, I can't tell you I'm a math scholar, but I can add, and
Yeah,
there's
right.
no way that the life would do that. So at 13 years old, I knew that my father had been given a death sentence.
Hmm.
That was hard to live with. It was very impactful. I wasn't in church. I didn't have a foundation. My
Right.
dad was a man that had become bitter, and
Right.
so the only Jesus I heard about was after a 2 or 3 day drunk. He would call out to Jesus, for mercy and grace. And I remember kind of thinking, gosh, I just don't understand. They tell me Jesus is good. What's good?
Hmm.
And then I started having experiences with God on my own, and I started
Hmm.
understanding a little more. But it
Hmm.
was deeply impactful. I can only tell you that as a young woman, you feel like your dad is your protector.
Right.
Your dad is your covering. He's the person who provides. You don't worry about anything. And all of that was removed from me in one day. And so what I most felt was vulnerable, just exposed, not just to the elements of life, but to people. I
Right.
just felt like, oh my gosh, I was just had a target on my back kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That it's hard. I cannot imagine. I mean, I grew up without a father, but I think it's a little different for a woman
Yeah.
than it is a man that growing up that without their dad
Yeah.
as
Sure.
their protector. My dad, I mean,
Sure.
I was 17 when he died. He died of cancer. Back
Mm,
when I was like
gosh.
a freshman or something like that in high school. So my mother, I lived with my mother, took care of her up to the very end, and she died in 2002. So I understand a little bit about that.
Man.
But yeah, being
Yeah.
without a father, I deal with some people right now that she lives with her grandmother, and so she doesn't have her father directly, as far as I could tell, in her life as
Right.
like at home. I think she still deals with them, but she does not deal with them in a home situation. So, and
Yeah.
that's a lot
Sure.
different. So male influence on her is a good thing because she
Mhm.
doesn't have it at home. Again, I don't know the relationship outside of that, but and at least at home wise. So okay, so you growing up, your dad was a pastor, but then he fell away from the faith. Now
Mhm.
yeah, you kind of mentioned it, but did he turn himself around before? You said he died, right? Or
He
you went to
did. He
prison?
did.
Yeah.
He went to prison. He went to prison after. he served almost 18 years of his 150-year sentence. And
Okay.
got very, very sick, had pancreatic cancer, and very fast moving cancer.
Okay.
And so, you know how we all hear the term at this point in our lives, jailhouse religion, right?
Right. Yes.
And I remember people saying, oh, you know, that all of our lives we've heard, well, people don't mean that, you know, that kind of thing. And so I go to visit him in prison and I don't know what to expect. But I
Mhm.
have an uncle who has been a minister for a very long time, just an amazing man of God, powerful man. And he
Okay.
had went before me and just had that come to Jesus conversation.
Right.
And what I have found even then and even now is that most people want to accept Jesus, but they can't get past their own shame, their own guilt.
Mhm.
And
Right.
my dad was in that place. My uncle was able to walk him through. So, yes, he turned his life around. It was a beautiful testimony. Few
Mhm.
days, literally, the week before he died, you know, he turned his life around
Okay.
and just began to experience God's goodness. And I saw God rush in. I saw God be faithful to a man that had not been faithful. And I
Right.
thought to myself, man, who doesn't want to serve this God? This is good here, you know?
Yeah. That's cool. I'm glad. I mean, I'm glad that it turned out well. That because you never know. I
Mm,
mean, someone to turn their back on God,
never
and
know.
you just never know what's happening because God knows their heart. But which is at least it's good that you kind of knew that he for
Yeah.
sure where he is, and
Mhm.
once we get over that grief or get over that dealing with ourselves and the mistakes we've made and the shameness and stuff like that.
Yes.
I mean, you got to remember, it's funny. My
Mhm.
pastor did a message on that about Jesus being on the cross, and all his shameness
Yeah.
was exposed to the world
Mhm.
because they,
Yep.
we see the good little Jesus with a little linen cloth wrapped on a cross, but he wasn't,
Mhm.
and your nakedness was exposed as that's how they did it, and
Sure.
so he was,
Sure.
exposed and stuff. But
Mhm.
all right, so you went there. So what, you know, dealing with because you didn't really know your dad as a pastor. What was
Mhm.
your let's, for lack of better words, your religious background and stuff? Like now, you did say an uncle
Yeah.
was a pastor. So do you come from
Yeah.
a pastor or missionary family?
I do. Well, I do and I don't.
Okay,
So my dad's side of the family had all been ministers at one point, and when his mother passed, this was the matriarch of the family, and it
right.
really, really damaged their walk with the Lord. And I learned so much for that. Even as a pastor myself, what I've learned is be so careful that your faith is in the master, not in
Right.
anybody else.
Hmm.
Because if your faith is tethered to anybody else and that person either slips or passes away or gets promoted and goes to another church, it
Hmm.
impacts you. And this is
Right.
why, we hear in the Bible, follow me as I follow Christ. Don't just follow me. And I think
Right.
they got tripped up in that a little bit. So I had some understanding that I had about two uncles left that, that were really
Hmm.
standing firm in the faith and gave me something to look at, but they both lived out of state. So I didn't really
Right.
see that on a day to day or even a month to month. So
Hmm.
for me, what I saw religiously was just pretty much he was a person you went to when you had, terrorized your home and family. And so I didn't
Right.
have a very good outview and look of him. It's
Hmm.
kind of funny because I wasn't really allowed to go to church. You imagine the culture, right? If you
Hmm.
have a child, and I was a very honest and outspoken child, Kevin, like I wanted to tell truth about everything. Well, you
Yeah.
can't send someone like that, out in public all the time because they'd be like, yes, my dad sells dope. You know what I mean? So my dad
Right.
was like, you can't really go everywhere because you just tell the truth.
Hmm.
And so, but I was allowed to go to this little Baptist church in my neighborhood. They had
Okay.
a vacation Bible school. And that's why I'm
Uh,
such a supporter of vacation Bible school. And
okay.
so I go and I'd never seen anything like it. You got to
Mm.
earn ribbons and you got to get candy for earning your Bible verses, and people cared
Right.
about you. And there was little egg salad sandwiches cut up right,
Oh,
And for
wow.
the first time, I learned that I mattered. And that
Right.
little Baptist church showed me I mattered. And out of that, I've went on
Mhm.
to lead many, many vacation Bible schools over the last 25 years, just for that reason when I was in kids ministry,
Okay.
because that week of VBS changed my eternity
Right.
because they were the only ones that told me that God loved me, the only ones.
You said something, and I'm trying to remember what it triggered a thought, and I can't. I didn't write it down, so I'll figure it out later. I'm like that. Yeah. My brain. I'm an I personality. It's like, "Phew." It's kind of like, you ever see the movie Up from Disney? like squirrel, it's like, it's kind of like
Yes.
that. Yeah, but it's just, so, oh, I know what it was, is you're talking about our putting faith, our belief in people, like,
Yes.
mothers, fathers, brothers, whatever. And when something happens to them, our worlds crash. But I see it more than not just that. It could be your job. It could be your ministry.
Anything.
It could be your business,
Yeah.
anything that you put more stock in it than Christ. It can be
Yes.
easily, everything we got is a gift from God. So if something
Mhm.
happens to it, I mean, the weird thing is if you read Job and it talks about it, God takes, God gives, and God takes,
Mhm.
that was just from
Right.
a perspective of him and a situation. But I mean, we have to be, it's like givers. If someone gives us something, we give it away. It's like we're only
Yeah.
stewards of the situation, whether it's our
Yeah.
finances or our health. I says, God, you're in control. If I get sick, I mean, I believe in healing, but God, if I get sick and I die, well, guess what? I'm with you. So it's like I always talk about people. So you believe in the rapture? Goes, yeah. I believe I'll see Christ in my lifetime.
Yeah.
It's whether I die or if you believe in the rapture, which is good. If you don't, that's fine too. But
Yeah.
I say I always will meet him. So you grew up, you had a little bit of background of with people in your family that was in the religious or pastors or something like that. So
Yeah.
and you're a pastor, so you're not a 2MK, you're a let me see, second generation pastor. Because it was your grandfather. Was he a pastor or?
My grandfather wasn't, but my paternal grandmother was
Okay,
very strong in the ministry. And, back in that day, women didn't always stand up and
right,
say pastor title, but she was
right.
certainly leading some sheep.
Okay,
So I think I kind of grabbed that heritage. This is
okay,
why it's so important to sow and to plant, because we
right.
never know who in our generation is going to come along and go, yes, I'm so glad you put
hmm
forth that effort. So I'm so grateful for the stand that she took. Yeah.
Well, they plowed the ground. That's right here. They were plowers.
Yes.
They set things forward, and then you were the seed that was
Mhm.
planted that's blooming. So
Yeah.
that's cool. So I'm thinking the question is like, tell me a little bit about what you do now for ministry wise and stuff, because you said you're a pastor. So talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that. Maybe go leading up to that of the decision to be one, and then a little bit about what you do. So go ahead from there.
Yeah. So God called me to preach at about 11 years old.
Okay.
He spoke to me. I wasn't going to church. I was reading my Bible. I didn't have anyone mentoring me. And I say all these things to say God's not afraid to speak to a heart that's ready to hear.
hmm
And so he spoke to me, and I'm going, oh my gosh, what do I do with this information? And as a kid, I thought, do I go out tomorrow? I'll begin to preach. But,
hmm
there's some training grounds. So he began to take me through
Right.
this training process. But unfortunately, I'll be honest with you, when my dad went to prison, that was traumatic for me. And my life
Yeah.
began to spiral. I just began to I didn't know, there was no stability, Kevin. There was nothing to grab onto.
hmm
And so, friends and people will become something you try to hold on to, situations. I started drinking, started trying to, fit in with somebody somewhere. And I
hmm
wasn't really good at any of it. And the
Right.
truth of the matter is when I hit 22 years old, by the time I was 22, I was in a marriage that was failing. I had a 4-year-old daughter and literally was miserable, just miserable. And I stood in a little Assemblies of God church, and I had an older lady ask me, do you just want to give your life to the Lord? And I
Right.
thought, my God, why would he want it?
Hmm.
Why would he want it? But little did I know he did. And the minute I confessed, yes, okay, I surrender, I yield, God, you can have it. I give him my life, and immediately, within 6 months' time, people couldn't even recognize me. God did such a just amazing work because I was desperate, I was hungry, and I was teachable.
Right.
And if I could share with anyone listening today, be those things. Be hungry for change. Be hungry for the Lord, and be teachable. So many times, Kevin, we want to heal. We want God to heal our wounds, but we want to be the great physician. We want to tell him how to do it. And we
Right.
don't really have that position. And so I just yielded and said, God, do it. Currently today, God has sent me an amazing man of God. I am in
Right.
a wonderful marriage. We serve together in our ministry, Yielded Life. And what we do is focus on teaching the body of Christ how to truly yield to the Father, how to yield
hmm
our gifts, our time, our talents, whatever it is.
Right.
Currently our primary focus right this moment is mentorship and discipleship. And
Okay.
we've actually extended that into the prison and drug addicts. We just have a heart for the
Mhm.
lost and the broken. And so a couple of weeks ago, we got to see 900 women at a women's facility.
Okay.
And out of those inmates, 700 claimed Christ.
Wow.
700 just said, I yield,
Awesome.
I'm ready for Jesus. And so
Yeah.
we have another event coming up here at a men's prison in Arizona. We're expecting God to do great things. So that's where our heart is. We believe that revival is going to start in places just like me, Kevin, where people
Right.
said, oh, nothing's going to change there. Nothing's coming out of there. Look who her dad is. I believe
Right.
that true revival is going to come out of our fathers. I believe that we're
Right.
going to go and find some people in some unique places.
Yeah, well, our mission is to go to the streets. I mean, sometimes churches
Amen.
they wait for people to come to them. But no, you got to go to the streets where they are. I mean, a lot of times people aren't going to darken the door of a church. You know, they're not like that. They just you got to just go to, and that's why it's like Market Street Ministry and things that I do. Like as I said,
Yeah.
I'm faith based. Most of my shows are, has a religious background and stuff like that, but I don't push it. I don't. That's not a question on the application to be a guest. Like, are you a believer, or what are you, a Baptist or a Pentecostal or Presbyterian? I don't ask those questions because I don't really care. I mean, but God somehow will work into the conversation. Now, I've done some shows that, I could tell after done because I'm spirit filled and I can tell that this person, is a little new agey. It's like, okay, I've kept it pretty clean, and I talked about, and it was an ex-teacher and stuff like that, and I just knew that it was a little new agey, but again, I don't dequalify them, because they're not Christians, because I'm the light. I might be the only Christ that they ever see. So that's what we need to do out in the world. It's like someone looks at you. It's like when I go down. The reason why I promote my shows, like every time I go to a restaurant, I leave a good tip and I leave my business card. But it's not like I'm selling a product. I want you to, if you don't know Christ and you listen to you, they might tune into this podcast and they're going to say, I'm a lot
Sure.
like her, I'm, drugs or whatever. I'm having a hard time, or I've gone through a divorce, or I've gone, death. And our conversation gets them, it might be not a, altar call type of message, but it will be planting a
Sure.
seed that can grow, that somebody else will come along and then trigger the growth and, stuff like that. So I always look at it that way. That's what the Millennium Beat does. It's basically, I've never thought of myself as an evangelist, but as I said, I know a lot of pastors. If you look at my guest report, there's a lot of people that are pastors. I've been hanging around pastors probably for the last 30 years. And even up in New England, I hung around a few pastors, my local pastor, but not as much as down here. I mean, I used to go to the Pastors Association meetings and stuff like that. And I know evangelists and speakers and stuff, and I travel. So it's a good, but I've always tried to bend the niche between churches. Because a lot of times I used to be in Amway, and I don't know if you're familiar with that. You probably, because you're in my age group. So yeah, if you had another person that was a friend, but it was not in the organization, they frowned on you getting cross pollination, and a lot of times some churches are a lot like that. Like like they'll have a special event and goes, well, I'm not going to that church. That's not my church, and compared to being led by the Holy Spirit. I mean, I went to a conference that I knew the evangelist who was putting on the conference. He had a guy come in. I think he was from South Africa or something like that, and awesome message. It was really good. But if you would have said his name and said, hey, so and so is speaking at so and place, I go, I don't know. I'm not going because I don't know. I mean, I've had people. I don't know. I'll say this, and I'll test you a little bit. You ever hear of a pastor named Bill Johnson?
Sounds familiar.
Okay,
Go ahead and tell me who we're talking about.
Bill Johnson was the pastor of a church in Redding, California. Bill Johnson, and so that's who it is. And then
Bethel,
I'll say
right?
Bethel. Yeah, that's it,
Yeah.
Bethel Church. And another name.
So I'm testing you then. Hold on, I need that credit.
Okay. Yeah, you got one point, one for Pastor Tiffany. Yeah.
1 point. That might be the only one I get. So I need
yeah. So let's keep keeping score. That's one for you. Second one would be Rick Joyner. You ever hear Rick
Rick
Joyner?
Joyner, Purpose Driven Life. Yes.
Well, Rick
Look, well,
Joyner's
I
ministry.
fix those up.
That
Remember what?
Rick Joyner is Morning Star Ministries out of North Carolina.
Oh,
They
okay.
bought
We're tied.
they bought the old PTL in North Carolina. I think it's
Oh,
North Carolina, or is
wow.
it South Carolina? It's one of those. I think it's North because they had a
Okay.
church in North Carolina, and then they go up. I went up to the mountains toward Boone, and that's where they Ravian Falls, I think it is.
Boone
So
is
they have a
great.
church. They have
Yeah.
there. I flew up there for a pastor leadership meeting of worship
Oh,
leaders,
wow.
pastors, all that kind of stuff. And so there was Steve Thompson, which was part of the ministry at one time. Rick Joyner, Susie, which was a singer. She used to be a backup singer for Reba McEntire. God told her not to get on the airplane, so she told Reba not to get onto the airplane. The airplane crashed and everybody died.
Oh, wow.
So God
Yeah.
prevented that from happening
Wow.
for Reba, and so I've done that. So that's basically another one. I don't really anybody else other than now this name. I guarantee it. Unless you're in the circle, you probably won't know this name. His name is Jack Taylor. Does it ring a bell?
Can't
Jack?
say
No.
I do.
Yeah. See,
No,
again,
it
he has.
doesn't.
It doesn't. Well, again,
No
it
offense
depends on.
to Jack.
Oh, well, he unfortunately passed away. He was my spiritual. He just became my
Okay.
spiritual father, and then he passed away. I didn't really get. I spent time with him when he wasn't my spiritual father, but not as a spiritual father. He had a heart problem, and he lived a long time, and he has many sons. Bill Johnson, another name, Randy Clark. Uh, you know who Randy Clark is? Yes, yeah, he's friends with Bill Johnson. Yeah, he's he I met did I yeah I met him. He came down to I used to work for a radio station. I worked for a radio station Wednesday, Thursday, maybe
Can
Tuesday. No,
tell
I don't.
you've got these names on lock.
I worked for a radio station for 2 days, and what they do is they have prayer time
Oh,
every morning at 10 o'clock. So Randy Johnson was in Melbourne, Florida, preaching. So they
wow.
asked him to come on down and do a little talk and they had prayer time. They says, "Hey, can you stick around and pray?" So he prayed. So he said, "Let me pray for the staff." So he went to pray for the staff, laid his hands on them, and boom, staff one, remember, falling over. Next one, boom, boom. So they get on the radio and they say, "Guys, something's going on here. God's moving." And this was January of '95, and God was moving, and so people were getting off the highway because it was only maybe 5 minutes or less to the I-95 up in Florida. So they were getting off the highway and going to the church, and they were just falling out. So basically, a major revival started back in '95, and all from Randy Clark praying for somebody. And
Wow.
then
That's
and then
huge.
from there it was Brownsville, and then you had Toronto. Actually, it was Toronto Blessing, then Brownsville, and then we just had one. And what is it, Asbury College? But
Sure.
it's like it was going really, really good, and it spread a little bit, but the city couldn't handle the people, so they basically shut it down. Say, "Okay, God, you can't move anymore. We can't handle this." So, but it's unfortunate because it was really a starting of a role. I hear a little bit, but you don't really hear much about it right now, and it's been a while. So all right, so we've kind of learned a little bit about you, how you became, and stuff like that. In closing, what would you like? I mean, you did a little bit, so I know that. But what else would you like to say to somebody in
Sure.
closing remarks? Somebody that might be listening, their father was messed up for some reason, divorced or something, and they're the
Sure.
only child, or they're by themselves, or they're with their mother. What would you say to them
Sure.
to help them get through the situation and know that there's hope?
You know, Kevin, this is the whole reason that I tell my story. I really believe the scripture, we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And you've done that
Right,
today. You've given testimony about the goodness of God and people of God. And what I would tell people is one, don't be ashamed of what you've been through.
right.
It's okay. And your past can be the key that unlocks somebody's present. You
Mhm.
can literally change someone's life just by being transparent. And so I never want to put on airs. I never want to act like I've arrived. Yes, I'm a pastor. Yes, God has blessed my life. But at the end of the day, I fully remember that it was Him Himself who pulled me out of the miry clay. It was Him who put me on a rock. I didn't do it for
Right.
myself. I couldn't do it for myself. So maybe there's people today and they're going, I don't have anyone to help me. I don't have anyone to help me. Let me let you know, God is not afraid to come where you are. He's just not. I remember thinking, Kevin, that God was so bold because he would speak to me as a child. He would come in, and speak in my father's house. And it was a controlling home. And I was scared sometimes. And I thought, wow, who is this God that's not afraid? I see that same God show up behind bars. I see him show up at pulpits. I see him show up at homeless meetings I'm at. I see him show up at places I can't explain. And so I just want to tell somebody, wherever you are, you're not somewhere he can't get to you.
How can people get a hold of you? Where are places
Sure.
that you're located that they could get a hold of you for whatever reason they want, they choose to? So where are
Yeah,
those
for
places?
sure, of course. Yep, you can come by way of our website at www.yieldedlife.org. You can find us on Facebook or Instagram at Yielded Life. If you throw a rock on social media, you can find my husband or myself on TikTok at Tiffany Bell Official or Howard Bell Official. We would love to connect. We love the body. We love kingdom. So we would absolutely love to connect with anyone.
Now, do you want to publicly give out an email so someone could write you and say, they could tell you a little bit of their story or something they're going through, or prayer request? Is there an email that they could
Yeah,
contact you?
sure. So it's Tiffany, Tiffany, at yieldedlife.org.
All right. Well, everybody, you've been listening to the Millennium Beat with your host, Kevin James. I've been on the computer with Pastor Tiffany Bell. Pastor Tiffany, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Everybody else, thanks for joining again. And remember, at the Millennium Beat, we like to encourage the world one story at a time.
This has been a Millennium Beat LLC production. Views and opinions of the guest are not always the views and opinions of the Millennium Beat LLC. Check us out on social media, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, and TikTok at the Millennium Beat, or on Twitter at Millennium_Beat. If you would like to partner with us to reach the world, go to our website for more information. You can go to themillenniumbeat.com or tmb2000.net. Your financial support is greatly appreciated. We couldn't do all we do without your support. The Millennium Beat just updated our website from the ground up. Check it out at themillenniumbeat.com, or you can get there by using millenniumbeat.com or tmb2000.net, where you'll be redirected to the millenniumbeat.com's homepage. I want to thank Mass Inbound for their awesome work on our website. If you're looking for somebody to build your site, I recommend them. You can reach them at massinbound.com. That is massinbound.com. These are some of the things that you can find on our website. Homepage. You can watch our latest YouTube video or listen to our audio podcast. Also listed are some of the platforms our audio podcast is on. You'll find out when the next podcast will air and who the guest will be. On the top right, you will find two red buttons, Learn How to Help and Become a Guest. Under Learn How to Help, you can become a partner, sponsor, contributor, or contribute to the future Millennium Bus. You can give one time or monthly recurring. The choice is yours. The other button is Be a Guest. Click it, go to the form, and fill it out, and we will get back to you. We would love to hear your story. Click the About Us drop-down where you'll find stats, where we are reaching people, and to find more information on our sponsors. Click on the podcast drop-down, then click on the calendar tab where it will tell you when the shows will air and who will be on them. Or if you need to know about any meetups of the Millennium Beat staff, partners, or listeners. Also, there might be on the calendar an event at which the Millennium Beat staff will be at. Click the Guest tab for all previous guests, links to their website, social media pages, and any store they might have. Click the Forms drop-down. There you'll find a release, Be a Guest, or Become a Sponsor form.